Hey, good morning, guys.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Oh, I don't
People
think I can
hopping
use
in.
is the chat working? Let's see. Yeah, okay.
It's yeah, the good morning. Like hopefully the chat's working.
Yep.
Make sure.
Morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning.
Let's make sure they're working. They should be working.
Oh, a lot of people are interested in trusts.
Yep.
It's nice to know.
Look at that. I see some of our students on here. Good morning. Hey, Patrice. Hopping in today. So you guys are probably already noticing there's no music and there's no beautiful face besides Jose, myself, and Chad. We don't see the beautiful Alexa this morning. She had something come up, so hopefully she'll hop on a little bit later. So she's given me the keys to drive the car today. I hope I don't screw this up, and if I do, don't tell her. That's what I'm gonna say. So.
Nice.
We all know that we know that she does all the announcements, but she's going to keep me in charge of this for a few minutes, and we'll get started in about a minute or two. Some of you guys, how many of you guys are hockey fans? You watched the Panthers win last night? Yeah, Chad. I know I did too. Jose, do you know we have a hockey
What
team?
what's hockey? I'm from
Yeah, so
Florida.
exactly. So we always have to
What is
educate Jose on our local sports or sports in general. He's just too much of an
where
accounting
do you
guy.
guys play that? You go in the pool and play hockey? Like you float, you walk on water? Is that what you do?
Not field hockey. No, no, I'm kidding. Good morning. Good morning. So yeah, great job with the Panthers last night. So Stanley Cup, here we come again. So that'll be pretty cool. Good morning, Gabriel. So live. Go ahead and put in the chat. Where are you guys listening in from? So number one, put in the chat where you guys listening in from because we're always curious to see if everyone is in South Florida. Okay, we got some Miami people, some Homestead.
We get some out of staters sometimes. I mean,
Yeah,
especially with my audience, because I do nationwide. Let's see. Oh, we have a Jersey Shore. Okay, excellent. Welcome.
yeah, my hood, the Jersey Shore.
There you go.
Okay.
Miami, North Lauderdale. Perfect.
All right.
Anybody from out of state? Anybody? Where are my people from? Texas. There we go. Jose from Texas. Excellent. I know I always get some Texas people on these. That's
I know
awesome.
last time we had some people from Atlanta. We've our furthest still to this to record is Nigeria.
Mm,
We actually had someone from Nigeria. So God knows what time. I know with the time difference,
right.
watching it at who knows what times, right? So,
Mm.
okay. Yeah, let's I'm just going to kind of get started while you guys start filling in today. So today we're doing a little fireside chat. Super excited is a lot of you guys, and I'll let these guys introduce themselves, Jose and Chad. But a ton of you guys have been talking about trust. Jose and I have done some in-person events, and trust is, if you don't have a trust or what is a trust, you're going to figure that out today. And then you're going to realize why you need one. It is literally going to change your life as you start building assets, or if you have any assets, I should say. So that's going to be pretty cool today. Also, some quick announcements, right? So we are giving away a 1 year membership. So make sure you text the word membership to 954-800-6961. So one lucky person is going to get paid to listen in today with Jose and Chad. Go ahead and type that in also. We do have some upcoming events that we're doing. So we do have another free webinar with Michael Johnston, who is one of the mentors. He's also in one of the mastermind groups I'm in. And the cool thing about Michael and Maddie, they sold over $40 million in real estate the last 2 years as agents, and they're investors also. Some of the other events coming up is we're going to have something for Next Million Mastermind. We have our monthly meeting, which is Wednesday. Mark Halpern, who is friggin' a genius. He's one of those biochem guys that just talks about things way above my head. He's a part-time investor and crushes it. Different PPMs and different projects. We have another Next Million Mastermind talking about AI and Facebook. And then I'm also going to do something for you guys on mastering your business, vision, systems, and people, and life by design. So those are events. All these events are free. The June 24th one is in person, so make sure you register because those are limited seats. And then also, if you want to keep up with our BPM events, make sure you text the word BPM RIA, and that's the best way to keep up with events. We are throwing a ton of events. Sometimes we're adding things last minute because you guys keep asking us, and that's one of the things out there that we're out there to help you guys. A couple of you guys are interested in our 2-day quick start. We just had our quick start. Gosh, when was it? It was like 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And a lot of great information. I'm going to show you A to Z how to flip houses. Jose is one of the speakers that we have. He's going to talk about your company setup, whether you should have an LLC, the difference between active and passive income, what kind of settings you should have for your business. We're going to talk about assignments and contracts. I'm going to talk about self-directed IRAs. We're going to have our contractor, Carl Shealy, aboard. Francisco Mago is also going to be speaking. So it's 2 full days and it's a money back guarantee and it's limited seats. So go ahead and fill out the poll if you're interested in our 2-day quick start. So that's pretty cool. That's coming up. Also, some of you guys are talking about becoming a member. So we do have our individual memberships and our corporate memberships. We have different pricing for in-person events, member pricing and non-member pricing, different pricing for our quick start events. And then also you get discounts at Home Depot, Rent Perfect, Camo Plan, and much more. That's for $295. And then also if you actually have a business and you say, hey, listen, you want to become a corporate member, we do offer that also, and that's 295 and 595. And then lastly, we do have mentoring where once again I put up all the money for the deals, and it's truly one-on-one mentorship. And if you really want to make money in this market and you want to use my money, go ahead and book a discovery call. You're going to have a ton of questions for me, and we'll move forward when it comes to that. We only are taking 6 students per month, guys. So it is limited on how many new seats that we take per month. We are using a lot of new technology. We're using AI. We're doing a ton of stuff on our acquisitions, and our wholesale numbers are well over 40,000 bucks per deal. So if you want to make money and learn in our market, make sure you book a discovery call. And last but not least, as Alexa says, we want to thank National RIA for all the benefits. We want to thank our corporate vendor partners like Jose, Carl Shealy, Kevin Thatcher for always supporting BPM RIA and making it the #1 RIA down here in South Florida. So cool. Now that we're done with the assignments, it feels like homework for me, but no. What I'm really excited about now is the good stuff, right? So, how many guys, I'm just kind of curious, go ahead and put in the chat if you know what a trust is. And in the meantime, I am going to introduce our guest. So I'll start with Jose. So Jose, if you've been watching any of our webinars or have you been coming to any of our meetings, you've seen Jose a million times, and he is our go-to guy when it comes to tax advising. And we always talk about it. All tax advisors or CPAs are not created equal. So I'll let him give a little bit of background. And then Chad, I've been fortunate that I've met him, I want to say probably within a year or so. We have some mutual friends. You might have seen him at DREA. He speaks at DREA often, and he is the guy for trust. And the reason we're actually doing this fireside chat is because you guys kept saying, "What about trust? I don't really understand it. I'm not really sure. Do I need it? Are they all the same?" On that end of it. And instead of, Jose explaining it or myself, we're not true experts, right? So we said, you know what? Let's have a true expert on here. And I'll let you guys give a little bit more background, Jose, on stuff that we
Yeah.
missed, and then I'll let Chad go.
Sure. Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know me, which is probably very few, my name is Jose Ramirez, Chief Tax Strategist with Advanced Tax Advisors. We specialize in tax planning for business owners, those in the real estate industry. We do webinars on a monthly basis. So I'm going to put a link in the chat so you guys can sign up to the next one. These are ongoing webinars. We don't stop. We just educate the public on the regular basis. It's our way of giving back, right? We want to educate as much people as we can. So Chad is a good friend of mine. Actually met him a couple years ago, and we became friends before he became my attorney. So I learned a lot about him. I love the guy. He's a former fire chief, right? So he has a lot of experience in the field as a firefighter. He was a chief, and then he transitioned into being an attorney. Which Chad, you're gonna tell the story, I'm sure. But in conversations I was having with him, I told him about my trust, how it was set up, and I told him that I had to clean it up. He suggested, yes, you got to clean it up, right? You got to get it reviewed every few years, probably, right? Because there's a lot of things change over the years, and he corrected a lot of the things on my trust. So I trust him with my own stuff, right? Which is why I invited him to join us on this webinar with Anish, and so here we are. Chad, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you so that people get to know you.
Absolutely, appreciate the kind words.
Yep.
So yeah, I actually went to law school. I was a fire chief, so I was the only guy in the room with a full uniform, sitting in the back of the class. It was an interesting experience. And for me, it's an extension of what I used to do as a firefighter. People often say, well, that's so different. Really, it's not. As a firefighter, I help people, and as a estate planning attorney, I help people. That is how I really approach it. And I try to make it very easy and understandable because, of course, the legal principles are very difficult and complicated. So I try to distill it down to like, look, this is the essence of what you need to know. Complexity usually is the enemy. There are some, many attorneys that will make some wonderfully complex trusts, but then when the client doesn't understand it, then they wind up having problems because they never understood the structure to begin with. So so I've been practicing law for 11 years. I'm a partner myself and my law partner, Fabian Moiger. We actually have represented Drea and many people in Drea for many of their legal issues that have popped up. But my focus is solely in the estate planning arena. That's a big arena because it also includes probate administration, trust administration, probate litigation, trust litigation. And the one thing I will tell you that's of critical importance is nobody wants to be in probate. Nobody. Anyone who's in probate, they're there because either there was a will in place, and I'm not saying wills are bad, but there was a will in place, or there was no plan at all. And the probate is incredibly expensive. It takes too long. You must have an attorney. And so for all those reasons, that's why I always tell people that, hey, look, if you have any assets, you have just your own house, you want to have a trust. Otherwise, at some point, somebody's going to probate, and it's going to be somebody you love. So you get some people will say, oh, Chad, that's I don't care. I literally somebody on just the day before I said, well, I'm not going to be here. I understand that, but is there anything that you care about in your life? Because they're going to be there. And that's not what we want for any of our family members. So that's kind of my approach to the whole practice, and we can take it from there.
Yeah, and what I always tell people, if you have no one in your life, you could definitely leave it to myself and Jose
That's
and
fair.
Chad. We'll gladly, we don't mind being the beneficiaries, and we'll
Right.
make sure we really appreciate your assets on that end of it. So I think we'll start because I know we have all different levels of people listening in. Guys, if you guys do have questions, put them in the Q&A. And yes, this will be recorded and thrown back up on our YouTube channel within 48 hours. So I guess let's start with some of the real basics. What is a trust? I guess, Chad, if you want to start with that.
That's a great question. And so I like to do it as a comparison, right? Trust versus will. I will hear all the time that, well, I have a will, so I don't go to probate. But the word probate means to prove a will.
To
So that by
prove.
itself should tell you that, wait a minute, what do you mean? And if you actually were to do something with a will after somebody died without going to court, it's actually a civil offense. It's a fancy term, executor de tort. Nobody really remembers that, but I will tell you that it means you're doing something you're not allowed to do. And so how do we avoid probate then? And that's buying through a trust. A revocable living trust works for 99% of the people out there, right? So revocable living trust, what I do while I'm alive, I transfer my assets into the trust. I have a trust for my family. So while I'm alive, I make this trust. It's a document. I put it together, and then I actually take the deed from my house and I put it into the trust. I transfer my vehicles into the trust. I put everything I have in that trust. So when I pass, I don't need a future judge. My wife simply picks up. If my wife were to pass, we're driving a car together. If we both go at the same time, it automatically passes to my kids. There is no probate involved. That's the power. You avoid all that misery. As you know, people are dealing with a death, right? So here they are dealing with a death, and they don't want to also, suddenly be thrown into a probate court. Now you're giving them two types of trauma that they just don't need. So the trust really helps you avoid because you retitle it now. I don't need a future judge to tell me who the owner is. The trust has already decided who the owner is.
Right. No, I love that. Let me ask a follow-up question, Chad. I mean, being that we work with a lot of students in real estate, a lot of investors, they are used to hearing the word land trust, right? Can you explain the differences between a land trust, revocable trust, irrevocable trust? I mean, I know the answer, but I just want everybody to hear. When somebody asks me, I kind of tell them, this is what my attorney tells me, right? Because I'm not an attorney and I can't give you legal advice, but I'll tell you what my attorney tells me. But now, guess what? I have my attorney here, so he can say it to you directly.
No, it's a great question, of course, because that's really, those are the three spheres that I tend to work in, right? So for a revocable living trust, that would be for me and my family, right? I may or may not have real estate in there. So it's really meant for you to go through your whole life, and then when your time comes, then it automatically passes to your family, period. Then you have a land trust, another great instrument. Typically a land trust is being done because we want to conceal the identity. We're trying to reduce our exposure, right? So if I own 1,000 pieces of real estate, boy, I become a big target, right? So I can hold it by a land trust. They look a little bit like a regular trust, right? They're not, but they look like it. And so you're still doing the same thing. You have a trustee, you have a beneficiary, you have an asset. And so what I can do is I can have that land trust in the background. I can have an LLC, and that LLC then is the trustee for the land trust. And you don't know that I own that LLC because then I put a partnership behind that. So for you to find me is going to take a lot of work, and usually you won't find, right? Like people like Sylvester Stallone or very famous people, they want to do it because they don't want to be bothered, right? So a land trust, great instrument to be able to own property. And really the primary reason originally was to have it where it would be, you could obscure the identity because the deed won't say, Chad Mercado's house. It will say the land trust of, ABC Corporation, and ABC Corporation is the trustee. Then I get asked a lot about irrevocable trust. Actually, a lot of misconceptions, I think. Primarily we use irrevocable trusts to reduce the level of income, or we'll call it the estate, of somebody who has some pretty substantial wealth, right? There's 100 varieties, so certainly we couldn't talk about all of them, but we can get the general principle. Usually what we're trying to do is trying to get a tax advantage, right? I can do a charitable remainder trust where I actually am putting money into a trust where I'm going to invest it, right? And I may even take back an annuity, but I've given that amount away. So that's why usually we don't do it for everybody, because let's say I gave $500,000. Well, it ain't my $500,000 anymore. It's going to go to the SPCA or to St. Jude's, wherever. Maybe I put in an investment and then I get the income back, but it's not mine anymore. So you can see why we kind of like cleave off that amount. And then of course, when we do irrevocable trust, as you know, we've got to be careful about gifting, because if I just take an asset and I dump it down the road, if I'm giving it to a person or a business, I may or may not hit a gifting scenario, and then I might trigger some tax consequences. So we're much more cautious when we do irrevocable trusts, and primarily we're doing them with some exceptions. Primarily we're doing them to reduce that person's overall, we'll say net worth to make it really easy. If they were at 30 million, okay, maybe we need to back that down some so that we can cleave off some of that amount of money, so that if that person passes, they don't get taxed with I think right now we're at like 13.9 if I remember. That's actually set to sunset. So that's the federal tax exemption. 13.9 if you're married is double that. And so I think, if I remember correctly, Jose, I think it sunsets at the end of this year and then January 1st. So if they do nothing, it goes back to the original amount, 5 million, indexed for inflation, 7 million, right? So what does all that mean? Well, if I just make it simple, why would people even do any of this? Well, they're doing it because we want to reduce the exposure, right? We don't want to pay a big tax amount, when somebody passes away. the federal government could do away with it if they wanted to. Florida does not have, an estate tax, but they could. And in some cases, I think it'd be pretty easy for them to do it if you think about it, because they would say, look, we don't want any money from you right now. It's just when you pass away. And so that's always looming in the background. Will Florida ever, create an estate tax where they're trying to take some money from you? I don't have the answer to that, but that's the idea. Irrevocable trust, primarily we're doing it to reduce some tax exposure, down the line. So that's kind of like the nuts and bolts. Revocable trust, that's for your family. Irrevocable trust, when my office is drafting it, usually we're trying to reduce that overall estate. And then the land trust, it does some of the same things, but the idea is we'll be able to conceal our identity there. And then the land trust will have language. Okay, if I die, it can say it goes to Jose because he's going to get my stuff. Well, those are the things you get. You get some good benefits from doing that instead of just putting even above my LLC. If I don't want it to have my LLC, I may make a land trust, create a separate business entity that you don't know who the owner is, and then that business entity then is the land trust. So for you to find me is nearly impossible.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you on that irrevocable trust, just because of what you're talking about, lineage. And so would you say and obviously the tax benefit, is there a certain amount of money you would say if you had a client, depending on their assets, should it be, like I know you use the 30 million example right now, generally speaking, versus the revocable trust?
Yeah, it's typically based upon the estate tax exemption, and that's why
Okay.
we're trying to reduce that number because that tax is going to be pretty
Correct.
horrendous, right? So people, well, I don't have that much money. Well, if you did, you wouldn't want to give away 40% of it. It's whatever amount is above it, but it's a big number, so you certainly don't want to get rid of that, right? I don't want that money going.
Right.
We can also, when people are married, right? What I can do is upon the death of the first spouse, and I of course don't know who that's going to be, when the first spouse passes, I can create in their family trust, I can create where we can do an exempt amount over to that side that they can take advantage of. We have some things called a credit shelter trust. And so I can take advantage of things where I'm not really doing it while I'm alive. It's when the first person passes. And
Mhm.
also it's like advanced planning. So if I say, okay, I have X number of dollars, well, I know the exemption amount. Yeah, but I don't know what it is 10 years from now. I don't know what it is 20
Yep.
years from now. So
Yep.
in the state of Florida, a trust can last 1,000 years. That's a real number in the statute. So obviously, it's going to go long beyond what the tax code is.
Absolutely. I know, like, living here in South Florida, being a football fan too, right?
Yeah.
And Dolphins, I know they basically had to sell the team
Mhm.
because of the tax burden. So would that something like if they would have had a trust or
Right.
done something, right? Like that's a good example.
Yeah, they
Uh,
usually do layers. Yeah. Most of the time when I'm doing when my clients are of greater net worth, typically we're doing layers of plans. Usually not one thing, we're usually doing
yep.
multiple things. So
Yeah.
fortunately right now the number is pretty high, but we don't know what the future holds.
Yeah, and the thing is, the reason I bring that up is there's a lot of people that I know that do very well financially, and they have no idea what a trust is,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and or they don't think they need one, or they're just experts at what they do, right? They know how to make money, and they don't know tax planning, right? They don't have someone like Jose or like you, Chad, or both of you guys on their team. And so one of the things I like talking about, like also is, and the reason we have Jose on here too, is how to build your power team, right? So some people will say, I only have X amount of properties, or do I really need this? Or the other option I always get is, oh man, it's going to be expensive. There's an attorney involved. There's an account. Like, can we talk about the importance of having a solid tax advisor that understands trust and a trust attorney like or what you specialize and how you guys work together? I'll leave it for either one of you guys or
I
both of
would say critically important. I would reach out to Jose. Hey, I have this. If it's in my bread and butter, like lower level stuff, then
you.
I'm pretty familiar with the tax code. But when I start getting to it, when I need a high net worth client, exactly what you said, I want a tax advisor, I want a financial advisor, and an attorney. And that triad, our goal is to get you the best bang for your buck. No matter what you have paid, if they do their job correctly, it's going to have the value like 10, 20 times whatever you paid. And trusts are not as expensive as people think they are. I think that's a misconception.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, you always need a team, but especially if you're a high worth individual, right? You're gonna need trust, you're gonna need tax planning, you're gonna need a financial planner probably, right? So that should be part of your team always.
Yeah. And
Oh,
and so like let's say, some of our audience, right? You're saying, hey, and I'm gonna use what Jose used, like I only have my own house.
Mhm.
I'm just starting to get into real estate. I have one house my wife and I live in and have like maybe one investment property. What are the benefits or why should they be in a trust
Yeah. So
now?
number one asset that I see, I won't say
Yep.
number one statistically, but the number one asset I see in probate is a house.
Yep.
So now we're in probate, going through the house. Sometimes we're just getting it to do the order determining homesteads. And now again, somebody's got to go into probate, and somebody's got to go through this whole process, and they're going to spend a significant amount of money. Where if you had just put it in a trust, it's just immediately going to go to your beneficiary. There's no probate. And so a house is a good one. Here's another one that happens a lot, right? Like I invest and I have properties in other states. Well, if I didn't have a trust and all my properties are in the trust, if I didn't, there'd be a probate case in every one of those states because Florida does not control Ohio. Florida does not control Alabama and vice versa. So what we have to do, if there's no plan, we open the case in Florida because we're talking about a Florida person right now, right? And then
Hmm.
we have to open up that case in Ohio to get rid of that property that's in Ohio, and then open up a case in Alabama to get rid. So you can have, I've had where it was 10 different states involved. Of course, that's expensive. That has nothing to do with me. I don't get to decide. I didn't buy 10 states, right? So if you had a trust, and all states have this, you can literally have your trust and then put all those properties in there. Now, if you're doing it for investment purposes, I don't do that because I want separation, right? So my ideal for an investor would be, okay, I have this trust, right? My family trust. Then I have, let's say, just three to make it easy. I would put each of those in an LLC. I don't do it when it's 100 because I don't think you want 100 business entities, but ideally legal protection. So if LLC one is getting sued, it doesn't impact those other two LLCs and it's not owned by the trust. It doesn't impact the trust. Then what I have in the back end, the operating agreement inside the LLC will say, hey, if I pass away, my stuff goes to the trust. So the trust is indirectly involved. So if they tried to sue the trust, we would get that kicked out because the trust is not involved. You have to sue that LLC. So that's how you would structure the exact same concept, but yet reduce all of your exposure personally, because that's what I always care about. I think one thing that keeps coming up too that I hear all the time is, well, I have an LLC. Okay, great. Do you have an operating agreement? And then almost always, and when we're talking smart people, it's just we just
oh, we talk about that all the time. Yeah.
all the time, yeah. Okay, and so what do you have an operating agreement? And almost always the answer is, what's an operating agreement? I'm going to take that as no.
Right. Right.
So the operating agreement really is the heart of it. Tells me what happens if you file bankruptcy. How many members do you have? How do you do voting? If you die, what happens? I have right now cases where the LLC is in probate because they had no operating agreement. They did the shell, and the shell cannot be passed to another person. So the LLC itself, a little perturbation, right? The LLC itself is not in probate. It's the ownership interest of the person who died. So then the LLC is still existing while we're waiting to figure out who's going to be your future owner. I actually have to ask the court to allow the personal representative to run the business while we figure out who the future owner is. So it's really complicated. Every time I say complicated, read that as it will cost more money. It
Yep.
absolutely will. So when you have an operating agreement, that's exactly what it will say. Hey, if Chad passes away, just pass it along, goes to Chad's trust, and then Chad's trust will figure out the rest. If it's getting sued, it's going to get sued separately. The other one I started to say was a single member LLC. In Florida, I won't say it's the same for every state because every state, of course, is different. But the single member LLC in Florida is almost worthless, especially based on new case law. It's they call it piercing the corporate veil. They basically punch right through it and get right to you. Okay, well, how do you fix that? Add a second member. Add a second. It's very easy. Well, yeah, I don't want a second member. Give them, half of a percent, right?
Yeah.
And that's one. Then two, make sure you honor business formalities, right? Because you want to treat it like a business. So have its own checking account.
Yeah.
Do business minutes. I mean, you could do those business minutes on ChatGPT. It's not complicated, but you do
Yeah.
need to honor business formalities because that's exactly what we will look for if we're suing that LLC and we're in court. That's right what we're going for. Did they honor those business formalities? Because look, if I get just an LLC, well, that's all I can sue. But if I get the LLC and the person, well, I got two things that I can go after. So if you don't want that, and I don't want it, then you structure your LLC, have at least two people, have an operating agreement, and then make sure your operating agreement tells me what to do.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
funny because my dad is I gave him 1%. I was pretty generous on the LLC, so
Very
instead of a half a percent, I gave him a full 1%. And exactly what you're talking about, it's so funny because it's so easy to look over these things. I know Jose constantly talks about this at our boot camp of all the people that set up their own LLC, go to SunBiz, and what's your
Pay
favorite
the
question?
fee,
How's it
right?
taxed?
Right.
An
Well,
LLC.
every time I ask, how is it taxed? And they say LLC, right? And well, LLC is not a taxable thing, right? Why is it taxed as a partnership? Is it a sole proprietorship? Is it a S corporation, right? So these are the things that come up all the time. A lot of people, especially when they do it themselves, it's either incomplete or done incorrectly, right?
And also today, just so you guys know, you're talking to three nerdy guys, right? So if you're new to this, you're not going to in 45 minutes or an hour figure out everything. We're
Right.
just getting a little bit deeper of certain things so you have an overview on it, right? And then you really want the experts to do this for you. Because I know sometimes people just shut down, right? Like I'm interested in trust. Man, he's talking this one and that end, and Jose's saying this and Anish, and the point is, we just want to give you a taste, right? These are the things that you have to do. I always tell them on our side, we all have three different versions. My side is make money, right? And Chad says, hey, keep your money, right?
Mhm.
And Jose says, I'm only going to give the government, their share of the money that they deserve, right? So that's why what we're doing today. I do have some questions. So Carly's asking, can you add a beneficiary after a irrevocable trust is established, or can it not be updated at all?
It depends on the language in the trust. What powers were reserved back inside that trust? So you would really, and that's a good question because it comes up a lot. And so the first thing I have to do is I have to get a copy of the trust and read it. Very often we will allow that to occur. If we don't, a well-written irrevocable trust will have a provision for what's called a trust protector. Well, what the heck is that? Well, it's a person that we can use in the future if we need to add a beneficiary, right? Oh my gosh, something happened and the beneficiary maybe passed away. No problem. The trust protector steps in without the court, by the way. That's the important part. They come in, they read what they're allowed to do in the trust. Mine say they can add the beneficiary with consent. And so you come in, okay, we're going to add Bill in as a beneficiary. So it really depends on the trust. And a well-written trust would also have the ability to pull in a trust protector so that it doesn't have to fail. We don't want it to fail. It creates all kinds of problems if it fails.
Got it. Okay, perfect. And this is for you, Jose. Monty's asking, how do I give away 1% if I'm a single LLC now? Or that could be either one of you guys.
So how do you
How
you
do
would
I
have
give
to
away
amend, you
1%
would have
because he's a single member LLC right now?
Oh, that's a great question, Chad. What do you just the operating agreement update, an amendment to the operating agreement, right?
Yep, I usually find, as we shared, that the operating agreement wasn't there, but if it is, you literally just amend the operating agreement. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm saying. Amended operating agreement dated, May 29, 2025. It's
Yeah.
actually fairly easy to do. I want to touch on that point that you made, Jose, about because they don't realize they formed that LLC and then they got to make that election within, I believe it was 60 days. And so when you work with an attorney, we give them the paperwork. I don't fill that part out because it's a form, right?
Right.
But hey, you've got to make that election, or you're not gonna be taxed as probably you probably want the S corp tax, right? And you didn't even make that election, so it's two deficiencies, right? They don't have the operating agreement number one, as you just shared. They didn't even know that they had to make an election. So
Right.
I think those are really really important points.
Yeah. And also you want to understand, uh, you want to understand which kind of tax entity you want for certain things, right? If it's real estate, you probably want a partnership. If it's an operating business, you probably want an S corp, right? And never mix the two. So really understanding what you're going to use the LLC for is important as an attorney as well, right? You probably want to ask those. We probably do ask those questions.
100%.
But something I learned from Chad recently, actually, and I didn't know this before. Well, I kind of knew it, but I didn't know what the purpose would be. Having multiple trusts. So, I have one trust that I've had for the past 15 years or so. It was just redone by Chad. That's because I have a daughter, right? I want to make sure that anything happens to me, she's protected. But then he brought it up. He's like, well, what if you get married again? Maybe you want to have a second trust, right? If you do get married, we'll have a second trust protecting your wife, right? I've never even considered that option as a
Which part, getting married or protecting your wife?
both.
Hey,
I've never considered getting married again,
remember
right?
this is recorded. Do you want me? I'll make sure I cut that out.
Yeah, yeah, please edit. Who's going to edit this for you, Alexa? So, but that's pretty interesting, right? You can actually have multiple family trusts to protect different people, right? So that you don't have to go back and modify the original trust because it's good the way it is. And things happen in life, right? You grow as a person, you grow as a business owner, you grow in assets. Maybe the original assets that you had, you want to leave to the original person that it was intended for. And then everything going forward, maybe it could be for your wife or for whoever you decide, right? It could be for Anish, for Chad, whatever. So these are things that you can actually add and what's the word I'm looking for? Layer, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
So I'm going to ask a simple, basic question, right? Like, so, we formed the correct trust. Is this recorded somewhere? I always get that question. How does
It's
that work?
I usually don't like recording them because, and I tell this to my clients. One, it's supposed to be a private document. It's your family members. It's not anybody else's business who you're protecting, right? So typically, I don't. If I'm going to record something, then we'll record what's called a certification of trust. It's like the executive summary, so it doesn't get into the details of who
Yeah.
gets what, but at least tells the world, here's my trustee and here's my future trustee. And by law, institutions can rely upon that. So you can even do that sometimes in closing. They'll want a certification of trust to record. That's fine. But I typically don't like the recording of trust because it's supposed to be a private document. The other problem, they'll do an amendment and they won't record the amendment. Oh
Mm,
boy. So now I have this in the public record, but I don't have the amendment in the public record, and the amendment changed that trust. So it's better. I've just found through practice it's better to not. If you want to, yes, but the general advice is to not for the reasons I shared.
yep, absolutely. What's funny is, I don't know what Chad's bill rate is. I'm going to start billing people per question. No, I'm kidding. I'm messing.
A lot of good questions.
Alejandro's asking, given the high proportion of non-resident, non-citizen investors in South Florida and the low U.S. estate tax exemption of 60,000 for such individuals in 2025, what legal strategies or structures do you suggest to minimize or avoid U.S. estate tax liability for on U.S. situated assets? So non-resident,
That's
non-citizen,
more that's more of
U.S.
a
assets.
tax question, but
Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
um, Chad, I don't know if you want me to handle this one.
Yeah, I'll put a piece in with whatever you put forward. Definitely.
So there is a strategy for foreign owners, right? So if they don't live in the U.S., you can set up a C corporation owned by a foreign entity outside of the states. So that eliminates capital gains, that eliminates estate taxes in the event that the person passes, right? So Chad, I don't know if you've heard of this strategy, but that's something that a lot of people do that are foreigners owning
Yeah.
real estate here.
Yeah, and often what we'll do too is we might set up a QDOT, qualified domestic trust. And so the key there is they got to be a U.S. trustee, not an overseas trustee. Otherwise, you start getting double taxation if they're not, in one of the treatises. Then you might be getting taxed in that wherever that home place is, in addition to being taxed here. Now, if it's all U.S., like I'm New Jersey and I'm doing Florida, that's a little bit easier, right? But if you're telling me that you're in Ireland or you're in, Dominican Republic as you go through, then for some of our clients, we'll set up that qualified domestic trust, which we call QDOT. So, but I also just here, I talk with a tax advisor. Hey, I needed, this is what I'm doing. What else should we do? Or should we not go in this direction? What would be the reasons why? Because really that primary reason for that is not the trust. The primary reason, as you point out, really is the taxation. That's
The
the really
taxation, yeah,
primary.
it's not really a trust issue at this point. It's just trying to figure out how to avoid estate taxes if that person were to pass. Yeah, and there's strategies around that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the other question we always get, I know we're talking a little about real estate, and if you have other assets, right? So whether you have luxury cars like Jose, which he's still hiding out, so he doesn't want anyone to know, but I just told everybody. So I'll,
They're
I'll
not
still
luxury,
find
they're
him and sue
exotics.
him. No. Whether it's cars, other assets, meaning stock accounts or cash at bank, would those components also go into a trust? Would it be in the same trust, or what is that? Do I need a separate trust for a different asset class? I always get that question too.
Because they're good questions, right? So we're playing with different areas of law, right? When we talk about like a pension, for example, there's a pension
Hmm.
law, there's a tax code, and then there's a trust law. And so some assets don't play well. So what I usually am able to do when that happens is what I would like to have is can the trust be the beneficiary? Sometimes the answer is no. Like if somebody's in a municipal pension and it says it has to be a person, well, that's not up to me. It has to be a person. Then I
Right.
will at least tell them, make sure your trust owns the bank account that the pension fund is being dropped into. That's going to be very helpful. Most of the time, your assets should all be one of two things. Either put in the trust when you make it, like I do the deed for the people that I'm working with. That way I know their house is in there. I don't have to worry about it. Then I
Yeah.
do another document called assignment of personal property. It's funny because it's only one single page, but it's all the personal property you own. So every watch, your jacket, your everything that we don't think about, forks, knives, tables, all in the trust automatically because it doesn't have a deed. Therefore, I don't have to ask that question. It also allows all future personal property purchases to be in the trust. So you don't even have to do anything with it. It's going to automatically be in the trust. Then when we get to accounts, most of the time, those accounts either can, well, one or two things I usually recommend. I like the trust to just be the beneficiary. I just want to make sure there's a connection. There has to be a connection. So if you tell me, well, I have an IRA, I'll put language in your trust that will allow you to capture an IRA. If you want to go to, the Jose, you can do that. But I always tell people at least have the second line down. The contingent beneficiary should always be the trust because the trust can't fail. A beneficiary can die beforehand or concurrently. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to probate. So you can own many, many classes of assets with a trust. The vehicles all the time, houses all the time. As I shared, you could put your house in there, and you get to preserve the homestead exemptions too, not
That
just
was the other
tax.
question.
Right, not just the tax, but people don't realize it's exempt from creditors. That's why people come, like O.J. Simpson. Why? Well, because that was all he could keep. Because everything else he was losing. But your homestead in Florida, we literally have the best protection nationwide, and
Yeah.
so yeah, very powerful. So yes, all those assets can go into the trust. The only one I recommend not is guns. We have a separate type of trust for gun trust. If it's a regular gun, I'm not too worried about it. But people, as you know, they like to own unique things.
I need another trust now, you're telling me, Chad?
Yeah.
Oh, do you own a
Jose,
suppressor?
you can't, don't put your tank in there. I know you got
Exactly, exactly. I do have some clients that own some unique weapons. I'm like, I don't know why you need this, but do not put that in your trust.
Wow. That's something I learned new too. Wow.
Yeah.
No idea about that.
Cool. So some people always they have trouble understanding also, and I'm generalizing, right? But when should your trust own your entity and when not, right? Or maybe don't own the entity but own the assets of the entity,
Right.
right? Do you usually want your trust to own the LLC, or do you want you to own the LLC and just have the trust own the assets?
Right. I prefer that the LLC is as separate as you can because I don't want the trust to get sued when the LLC is getting sued. As an attorney, when we're doing discovery, I'm going to find that out,
Right.
right? So I'm going to ask for them to produce that operating agreement, produce the LLC. And so what I typically do is I will assign the beneficial interest. So all the bad stuff can stay, and whatever is left over, so let's say it gets liquidated for easy purposes. Okay, got liquidated. Great. Only if there's good stuff will that come into my trust. And that's all that I want to come into my trust. But you could, as you mentioned, you can have it owning the asset. I just really want, personally, liability wise, I want that separation. I love the LLC. So it's, for our students listening, everybody listening, what's the name of it? Limited liability. I want to limit my liability. So I don't want to then put my trust in there and increase my liability by an action, right? So that's when I'm doing talk with clients. That's one of the things I'll ask them. That's ownership structure. How do you own your assets? So that way I can start figuring out where can I give you protection, right? A lot of them will just own it outright in their own name. Okay, like literally real estate property. Like, are you
Yeah.
investing in that property? Yes, ever renter. I'm like, I would really prefer if it's not finance because as you know sometimes they won't let you. But if you own it and you bought it as an LLC, then let's not mix the water. Let's keep that over there. So if that thing gets sued, it's sued separately. So I think you mentioned it's the layers, right? It's the onion. I want as many layers as I can before you ever get to the core, which is me. I want to have as many things protected as I can.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just a document, right, Chad? I mean, transferring the benefits of the LLC is just amending the operating agreement saying that all of the good stuff from the LLC is owned by the trust, all of the bad stuff stays with the LLC, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't even connect it. If the client is, has a really problematic, maybe they've already been sued a couple times, then I might just put in the op agreement that upon their death, You don't. I'm not inheriting liability upon your death. I'm inheriting the only the beneficial asset. So it's either in the operating agreement or it's a single piece of paper. It's very that part's actually pretty easy. It's the analysis that counts.
Now, something I didn't know is that somebody can sue a trust. I didn't know you can sue a trust because it's
Oh, yeah.
really you, right? And they're suing
Yeah.
you in essence.
Yeah, it depends on whether or not the person, if somebody died, then it became irrevocable as an operation of law. So I might be suing, typically what you're suing is you're actually suing the trustee, right? The trust is a piece of paper. It's really you're
Right.
suing the trustee. And usually we're suing the trustee because they did something wrong. That's my number one lawsuit is the trustee
Right.
took some money, they didn't invest properly. That's where it usually goes. It's typically not while you're alive
Yeah.
because really it's just a piece of paper while you're alive. It's not meant to be asset protection while you're alive. But if you become incapacitated, not just death, but you become incapacitated, you get protections the second you become incapacitated. So, people always thinking about death and asset. No, this isn't just about death. This literally will live with you the rest of your life. If something happens to you, you're protected. It's very powerful.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's always important. The other, I mean, that's a good thing that you're just talking about the trustee. So how about some best practices, right? I got, ABC Family Trust, and I
Mm-hmm.
made myself the trustee.
Yeah,
Or,
that's
which obviously, let's talk about best practices.
yeah. So
And also best practices. And what is a job of a trustee? Can it be my accountant? Can it be my lawyer? Can it be whoever, right?
So when you make your own family trust, typically it's you because it's your assets. We're not doing it for asset protection. We're doing it for some tax considerations and for when you pass that we know we're going to completely avoid probate. That by itself is worth much more than you ever going to pay for a trust.
Yeah.
So usually it's you, and because it's you, you're not even going to feel any different. Well, my trust is right on the shelf right now. I pull it
You,
out every few years.
you,
That's
you
it.
don't feel taller?
What's that?
You don't feel taller? You're definitely smarter by now.
Good point. So my wife is a trustee as well because it's our asset. So you're not going to feel any different. Now, if
Yeah.
you're taking over for another person, right, and sometimes that happens. Maybe they're starting to have dementia, for example. Okay, well, before they become fully incapacitated, let's have somebody step in. So if you're doing it for another person, well, now you have a very important role. Now I'm acting on behalf of another person. There's a whole set of statutes on what I'm supposed to do, right? The big ones are I got to inform, right? I need to make sure my beneficiaries are informed, right? First, they need to know there is a trust. That a lot of times the people will sue because they never knew there's a trust. Well, how did they not know there was a trust? Because the trustee was supposed to do that. So I actually give my clients, if they're doing administration, I give them a book called a trustee manual. It's like a dictionary. I tell them, do not read it. It's not for that. It's for circumstance A arises. Go to that chapter, just like any other reference material, and just look at what you need to do in that circumstance. But in the initial stages, you really do want to talk to an attorney just to get the first part rolling. Even if you don't retain the attorney, at least have the conversation because there are quite a bit of duties. So that would be my first advice: is at least talk with an attorney, right? It's more than what you would think in terms of your responsibilities because you are really acting in a fiduciary role and you're doing it. You must do it by law in the best interest of the beneficiary, even if that might give you something less. And this happens a lot
Mhm.
with family members, but you must act in the best interest of the beneficiary. And if you don't, well, there might be some consequence to that. So yeah, I think that's the first most critical part. So back to the, like your own family trust, typically it's you and you don't need to do anything else because we didn't make it for that reason.
Sure.
If
Yep.
you have an irrevocable trust, then you can't be the trustee because it's irrevocable. And so now we have to have another person, and that person then same advice. Talk to an attorney. Let's look at what you got. I'm gonna give you some guidance. Maybe then after that, maybe you only have to follow up every year because there's an annual accounting due. So maybe every year we follow up. How's everything going? Okay, let's get the accounting done. Like I'm a trustee of a trust for someone else, right? So I use an accountant. I'm not going to do the accounting. I pay the accountant. The accountant does it, and I pass it right along to the beneficiary. So I think that's the primary because there's too many things for somebody to get tripped up on. It's not an area that you kind of step in lightly. For yours, no problem. But if you're going to do it for somebody else, then really that's when you really should talk to an attorney to keep yourself protected and informed.
Yeah. Makes sense. Jose, what about on the accounting side, right? We're talking about I have like three trusts, I have all this stuff. What happens on, paperwork? Do I have to do and I know the answer because I'm around with you, but like this is the question we always get is now I got to do 50. or 10 LLCs or on the accounting,
Oh,
you're
right.
paying too
Yeah.
much. And
Yeah.
so I know you did a great job. So for anyone that's been in our in-person events, the full day ones that we've done, Jose added something that we really started diving in. That was pretty awesome. So I don't know if you want
Yeah,
to.
you loved it. Yeah. You're
Yeah, I
like,
thought it
wow,
was
I've never seen you do
fantastic.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so we did a little part of the class involved setting up multiple LLCs for multiple real estate properties. Oh, by the way, the question always comes up, Chad. How many LLCs should I have? I mean, if I should I have one property and one LLC? And I always tell people, depends on who you ask, right? If you ask an attorney's going to tell you, yes, one property per LLC, right? If you ask me, I'm a little more flexible, right?
Yeah.
No,
So
I think you're right.
yeah, so the way from a tax perspective, you probably want to have a partnership up here, right? The partnership because that offers you protection, and then that partnership owns individual LLCs, disregarded entities in the multiple states that you may have the property, right? Because a lot of people say, I don't want to have to do all those tax returns. Well, all those individual LLCs, disregarded entities, get rolled up to the one partnership, and you only have to do one tax return, which is great, right? Now, in terms of liability, that's a different question. Asset protection, that's a different question. Now, a lot of people always ask, well, Jose, I have a partnership, I have an LLC, I'm protected, right? Yeah, I mean, you're protected in the sense that, people could still sue you and you still have to defend yourself, right? Now, there's inside protection and outside protection, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that, chat? Like, somebody you run somebody over with your car. They sue you personally. Maybe that LLC, that partnership is protected, but you're not, right? And vice versa. Somebody falls on a property or I had a case once, I had a client once who the tenant had a dog who bit the other tenant, and the tenant sued the landlord for that property.
Right.
Uh, Sued the LLC, but not the person individually, right? So she was protected personally, but the property wasn't protected. Or can you kind of talk a little bit about that, how that works, inside protection, outside protection?
I would say that the our first protection for all of us is insurance.
Yes, I talk
We
about
need
that as
to have
well. Yes,
insurance.
general liability is going to be important.
Yeah, because that's part of what occurs is just what you said. There's so many scenarios that we that we may or may not even foresee. Dog bite strict liability, so somebody's paying, and the attorney's job is to go find out who is supposed to pay. So they're going to go try and start asking you, what about this party? What about this party? What about this party? So critically important that you would have your LLC gives you that by its structure and nature, and as long as it's not a single member, it's going to give you the protection by and through all the limited liability company statutes that give you the protection. Then you have, okay, yeah, but now where are you personally exposed? Well, if you did gross malpractice, well, that's not going to protect you, right? It's gross malpractice, so therefore you're not protected. But externally, that's usually what I tell people. One, your biggest protection I shared already is homestead, right? And so owning a home in Florida is a very good thing. And then two, you need to make sure you have insurance and make sure you might need layers of insurance, right? If you have, I just have a car and a house, okay, you probably don't need that, your typical insurance policy. But if you start telling me you have a higher net worth, yeah, maybe it's time to look at an umbrella policy because what if, as you're sharing, you could become, you didn't think you were going to get personally exposed, but then you did by a way that we didn't think about, right? You cannot think of every scenario. If the law was that simple, why are we still making laws 200 years later? It's not simple.
Right.
So that's what I typically is the biggest thing I tell my clients. A lot of them are underinsured or not insured at all. I'm like, wait. What do you mean you don't have insurance? And I'm talking about specifically liability coverage, not just if the house burns down and get a new house. No. What liability coverage do you have? That's a critical question.
Yeah. Yeah, insurance is going to be key. I mean, I know that I'm probably overinsured when it comes to my personal assets, but whatever. It's not that, believe it or not, guys, insurance is very cheap, right? I mean, I
Right.
have to, I
Yeah,
have to,
relatively to the downside, right? I think Kevin Thatcher, who speaks for us also on the boot camps, he always says the same thing. You feel like you don't need insurance until you do,
right,
right?
right,
And then you're like, oh, thank God I got it. Thank God I got
right.
title insurance or whatever that case is. This question is for you, Jose. When forming the LLC, what are the additional documents you should have? Agreement being one. What others should you have?
Well, operating agreement is going to be the main one, right? But you also will probably need a board of directors meeting, waiver of meeting, Then you need your stock certificates, your unit certificates. And then the most important, besides the operating agreement, in my opinion, is going to be the IRS document that tells you how you operate. Are you going to be taxed as a partnership? Are you going to be taxed as a S corporation? Whatever, right? So you have to have that in there because like you pointed out before, Anish, I can't tell you how many times I've had to ask the question, how, how are you operating your business?
Yeah.
LLC. LLC does not tell me anything because the IRS does not recognize LLC as an entity. That's through the state. The state gives you the LLC. The IRS wants to know how you want to be taxed, right? And if you don't know how you want to be taxed, this has happened millions of times. You're probably filing the wrong tax return. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a big deal. You want to make sure that you know whether you're a partnership, you're a disregarded entity, sole proprietorship, or you're being taxed as an S corporation, because that could be a problem if you don't know. Okay.
Yeah, I like using what you always say also, Jose. Everything's fixable. It's just going to cost you,
Yeah. Yeah. And Chad
right?
just said it
So
too. Yeah. Complicated means expensive, right? Yeah. Everything's fixable. It's just going to cost a lot more money, a lot more time. Right. So
yeah,
might as well get it done right the first time, right?
yeah. As I said, like because you know what happens. Like everyone's excited about real estate. I know most of you guys are in the real estate spectrum, and you want to flip houses, you want to do all this stuff, and then you let all this money go out on the bottom end, right? Because the structure is wrong,
Yeah.
or whatever you're doing, or God forbid, you get sued for something and it's not the right structure, and something else happens too. So Monty's asking if I'm just starting real estate investment, what's the initial structure that should be in place to establish an entity to conduct transactions? And I also know I know Monty well, so he's also a real estate agent too. So if he was doing one for a real estate agent, right? And also if he was going to flip houses or wholesale houses. So I guess that would be a two-part question
Well,
on
it
that.
depends on who you ask. If you're asking me or you're asking Chad, the answers are going to be
I'll let
a
both of you
little
guys.
different.
Go ahead, Jose.
Well, I mean, I'm all about, in the beginning when you're starting out, I'm all about saving money, right? Because you want to make sure that this business is going to work, you're going to take off, right? So I always tell people start with a LLC single member, right? Start off with a single member, and if you net $50,000 or more, then you can convert it into an S corporation. But, of course, Chad, and I agree with you, the partnership, the two-member LLC is going to be more asset protection. But I am just not too concerned with that in the beginning because who the hell's going to sue you when you got no money, right?
Right.
So that's my train of thought on that. Eventually, you want to get more partnerships as you start adding real estate, you start adding assets. Yes, you want to have the partnerships.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
I agree. There's a give and take, right? Like, so if I wanted to give pure legal advice, an LLC for every property. That's what if I own 100 properties? Are we really managing 100 LLCs?
Right.
Now it's getting a little ridiculous, right? So
Yeah.
I think without the legal but more practicality, there becomes a point. It's along the lines of what you're saying. There's a point where like, hold on, let's be practical too. I don't want to manage 100 LLCs. By the way, that's 100 fees I'm going to be paying every single
Yeah.
year, 100
Yeah.
annual reports I got to do. So sometimes we will group some things together just because it's too much to manage. I mean, that's a happy problem, right? If you have 100 properties, God bless you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is a point where it's almost like a breaking point where we don't want to manage that many structures. So then we might put 5 properties under one LLC and accept the risk that hey, if one gets sued, the other gets sued. But I just you get to a point where, geez, well, what's the breaking point? What if you own 1,000 properties? At some point, we're all going to have a breaking point. So that's
Right.
what comes in. The practicality starts coming in.
Yeah,
Totally.
absolutely. Put in the chat, are you guys loving this? Are we getting great information from Chad and Jose? I'm just kind of curious. Make sure you give them some love in there. Okay, we got a couple yeses.
Thank
All right,
you.
all right. You guys are doing all
Good.
right.
Awesome. You got a
Yeah,
lot of people
I'm
here.
telling you, you get a finance guy, an accountant, and an attorney in a virtual Zoom room. It
Mhm.
could be a mess, right? No, I'm just kidding on
Yeah.
that end of it. But it's pretty cool to start seeing, like, again, we're just expanding the mind of what's happening out there. And so Sean's got a three-part question. How do we set up an irrevocable or land trust,
Mhm.
right? What should we bring to the attorney on the first meeting? How does a person decide on who should be the attorney for the trust?
Well,
Book a
first off,
call with Chad.
yeah, first you obviously want you want to be comfortable with who you're working for. It's not just do they are they good at? Well, yeah, I think we all want somebody who's good at. I think that I'll just say that we all want that.
Yeah.
But then you really want to be able to work with somebody because you're probably going to have more questions than just make my documents, put my documents, thank you, bye. It almost never works like that. So you want to be comfortable. You want to feel like that person actually has your best interest in heart, not just, I'm here to do your documents, thank you for coming to my office, and goodbye. And there are plenty of people who operate that way. I'm not against them or for them. That's just how it is. So you could set up a land trust by saying, okay, I want to purchase this property. I obviously need to know the property, the legal description, the deed. You can give me the PSA, purchase and sale agreement, right? And then I can take that and say, okay, we'll start putting that together. Make sure the title underwriter doesn't want something extra, because sometimes they do. And then that's when we have that conversation. All right, who's going to be the trustee? If you're trying to keep your identity, suppressed, then who's the trustee? And usually it's a business entity, whatever one they choose. So anyone can do it, and it has to be acceptable as part of the deal. Again, there's always an underwriter, and then the attorney has to draft it, right? It looks a lot like a regular trust, and then it gets recorded, but it's not going to say Chad's property. It's going to say, whatever, 123 LLC is the trustee of ABC Land Trust. There'll be two different names. So anybody.
And so me being Indian, I'm always worried about cost.
Mhm.
Can you just give a basic range? I know it depends on how complicated the trusts become. Is there a basic range that
20,000. It's just 20,000.
20,000?
No, they're
Oh,
actually
you
very.
need a boat? Chad, what are you getting a boat there?
I need a boat. Please help me, help me. No, they're a lot more affordable than people realize. So our land trusts tend to be about 1,000. That has some variation if there's some complexity, but that's about the general range that it is. You can find cheaper. I always say be careful with cheaper. I'm not telling you not to. Just be careful. Too cheap always makes me say, how many land trusts have you done? I've
Yeah.
not only have I written them, I'm in litigation, on them as well. And fortunately, none of the ones that I wrote. We have a case right now where land trust is at the center of the litigation. So, when we were talking about revocable trusts, we're typically around the 1750. Some of my clients could go, if they have a super simple one, 1500. Now, if they have a high wealth, well, I've got to do more work. It's not that you make more money. That's not the point. You have a higher net worth, I got to give you more protection. So those might go up to say 2 to 4,000, somewhere in that range, but
Yeah.
they're very affordable. I mean,
Yeah.
look, there's no probate. So let's say that anybody who's on here could get I would tell them, just for today only, you're going to get a $1,500 trust. If you reach out, I'll give you that. There's no probate. You're going to pay 1,500. It doesn't exist. You're going to pay. You have to have an attorney by law. Your court cost is 401. You're going to have $500 in certified mailing. So you're going to be probably 5 to 10 times that amount. And you ensure that that's where your family's going.
Yeah.
That's just how it
And
is. You have
I
no
mean
claim.
that you're not even including like if they have a mortgage on it, they can't sell it, the tax,
Right.
all the other stuff that goes on.
Right.
Turned into, besides the fighting, God forbid. I only have
Right.
one sister and we don't
Yeah.
agree on everything.
Exactly.
Imagine all the other stuff, because we've done so many probate deals. I know you've done them on your side, and like it just becomes a little hairy on it. So, again, today's really about planning. So I think that's always important. There's a couple more questions in here. They're rolling in right now. So, and I was waiting for someone to ask this. Would you recommend a Wyoming LLC to be registered agent of a Florida LLC to transact properties? Obviously, Wyoming, you always hear Delaware, Nevada.
Right.
My favorite is Wyoming, but I'll leave,
So it's
everything up to you guys, since you guys are the experts of what you guys are saying on both sides.
Yeah, originally, the original thought process came from the reason you hear Delaware all the time is because they have the most robust business entity law, in our country by far. That's
Yeah.
why you will find that very large companies will do it because they have the most favorable laws. Trust is a little bit of a different animal, right? One, we typically want a connection, so the trustee can be anywhere. Usually, what I'm going to get into with the client is, why are you doing that? What is the reason that you're doing that? And I want them to tell me what they think. And sometimes it's going to be right. A lot of times it's just misinformation, pieces of information kind of assembled and then regurgitated. I'm like, well, I don't think that you need to do that. Here are the reasons why. But
Mm.
situs is important because if you're getting sued in Florida and now you're Wyoming, well, which law are we following? Right? We call conflict of law, and that may not go well, right? So Florida's going to want to apply Florida law, and then we might be getting into a federal court where we could have handled it in a state court. And so sometimes you get unintended consequences. It looked good on the surface, and there are some good reasons, right? but it only looked good on the surface, and there's all these other things that we maybe didn't think about. And was it really worth it, to do that? So
Yeah. And Jose, did you want to add anything to that on the?
Yeah, I personally have used the Wyoming, right? Wyoming, the way I do it is my Wyoming entity is owned by me personally via my trust, right? And my Wyoming entity owns my LLCs in North Carolina and in Florida. So the reason I do it that way is because it gives me anonymity. The anonymity piece is nice. I mean, I'm not, in my opinion, it's very hard for you to be sued for real estate because it's an asset that doesn't do anything, just sits there. It's not engaged in a business activity. You're not doing much, right? So the concern was not really the asset protection. For me, it was just the privacy. The privacy is because I hate people calling or sending me mailers, hey, do you want to sell your house? No offense to you guys, but no, I don't want to sell my house. I want to keep all my houses until I die. No offense to any, people doing the marketing. So yeah, I mean, and that's the way I structured it, right? There's only one tax return. I get the anonymity. My understanding of the Wyoming entity is that the Wyoming state is the first state who created the LLC, so their laws are pretty good. They protect the business owner pretty well. But to your point, Chad, I mean, if my Wyoming LLC owns an LLC in North Carolina and there's an issue there, a legal issue in North Carolina, it's probably going to have to take place in North Carolina. The litigation would have to take place in North Carolina, which is a
right.
valid point. But hopefully it never gets to that point. And same thing in Florida, right? If my LLC is owned by in Florida is owned by my Wyoming, we may have to deal with Florida laws because it is a we probably would have to use because the LLC is created in Florida and the asset is in Florida.
Right.
But the main reason I did it was anonymity, right?
Yep. I know this is, I think we kind of touched on this, but someone had just got a message like asking, does the trust have to file tax returns?
If
Depends.
you are a revocable person, I'll just do the revocable side, and then
Yeah.
Jose can do the deeper. Really, it's just my social security number. I'm not using it as an irrevocable trust. But if you become incapacitated or you make it irrevocable, well, now it's actually an entity. And so if you have obviously you have deeper level of knowledge, but typically that's what we're just doing. It's still your stuff. You give it to yourself. You're the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. So we're going to use your social security, and you're going to file your normal tax return. Not true if you're irrevocable.
Yeah. So if the trust has income, right? Basically, I think there's a threshold over $600. You have to file a tax return. But if it's just holding assets, not producing any income, then you're fine. And if the I always forget the person owning the trust. What's the title for that? The executor?
The person who made it is either the grantor or the settlor. That's
Okay,
who
so
made it.
So if the grantor is still alive, then there is no everything flows to that person. So everything gets reported on the 1040 for that person. So there is no separate tax return. When there is a tax return required is when that person passes and the trust is collecting income.
And just
Yep.
that goes back to that. It becomes irrevocable instantly, right? The other thing is it becomes irrevocable if the person becomes incapacitated because they can no longer change it and they can't revoke it because they're incapacitated. Now, we've had where we got an EIN and then the person regained capacity, right? That nobody expected, doctors didn't expect
Oh
it.
wow.
So you sometimes
Jeez.
get some unique scenarios that, again, we didn't foresee it because, well, geez, actually it took two doctors. So two doctors have declared this and then they regain their capacity. Like, oops, okay, well, we got to turn it back around. Gonna have to make some phone calls.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you kind of just answered this question, but Lawanda is asking what happens if you set up an irrevocable trust and the beneficiary passes away, being that it's an irrevocable trust and you can't change it. How does that work? I-
Again, that goes back to the language of the trust. Two things. One, hopefully the trust allows me to do something. I'll just make it
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
Or we can do that trust protector I talked about earlier. Typically, in my irrevocables, I put a trust protector because it's irrevocable. Sometimes
Yeah.
you need somebody to step in. Very often, though, the trust will say what to do. It really should. Like that's. It's not like we don't know that people pass,
Yeah. A
right?
secondary beneficiary or something. Yeah.
Mhm. Exactly. That's very, very, very common. And the worst case scenario, sometimes we have to go to court, and the court will help us to reform it. It doesn't go away. That's the good part, right?
Yeah.
I want to try and stay out of court. That's why I put in the trust protector. It helps me to avoid court.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. It totally makes sense. Jorge's asking, what guidelines should you follow to name the trust?
You can name it whatever you want. Typically, I have one where it was the Lollipop Trust. I'm like, whatever you want, fine, Lollipop Trust. I don't know how people are going to take that very seriously when you walk into Wells Fargo,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
you're allowed to do whatever you want.
From it
Usually, yeah, usually the naming is typically the person's name if we're not worried about anonymity, right? If we're not worried about
I was just
that,
gonna point that out. Yeah, so if you are worried about anonymity, you want to make it ABC Family Trust, right?
absolutely. And we do that. We have plenty of trusts that do that. There was a story behind that, that lollipop thing, but as I said, but that is unintended consequences. That's what happened when they went to the bank. They were like, "What is this?"
Absolutely. Like, right? Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah, I've seen some crazy names on trust. You're just like, oh my Lord
Mhm.
on that. So the other question I get also, right? Let's talk about it's your primary home, you have a mortgage on it, and now you put it into a trust. Is the due on sale clause, or have you seen a due on sale clause be activated?
They can't now. There's a law that prevents that. It used to be, and
Yeah.
actually the bank, it's like a federal law. So the banks started doing that. Well, you transferred. No, I didn't. I gave it to myself. So this is for an interfamiliar, right? I was Chad the individual, and now I'm Chad the trustee. It's still Chad. Florida recognizes it, right? I don't have to pay doc stamps. It's
Right.
an interfamilial
Yeah.
transfer. I transfer it to myself. So
Yeah.
legislature stepped in, and why would they care? Well, they would care because we don't want people in probate. That's
Yes.
expensive for the state. We got to pay judges, we got to pay the clerk, we got to pay case managers. If I can get people out of probate, that's a state benefit. So the state, also has some protections. It doesn't allow that. And so sometimes you'll get, I usually will write a letter. Usually, most of the banks know about this. They're not an issue, but every once in a while, a smaller bank might say something. I'll send them a letter. No, please refer to this law, and I'm, very, stern letter, and you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do this.
Yep, that's always good. Yeah, because that's always a big question I get. Someone's asking, I guess this was probably the question earlier, was do you want to do it based on the asset value? I guess the LLC. So how many LLC? I know we're joking about if you have 1,000 properties, 1,000 LLCs. I know Jose used a dollar amount per
Yeah.
LLC. Some
Yeah.
people
My
use
personal preference is 500,000 per
yeah, so
LLC. Right.
it just really goes back to what works for you guys, right? So and it's got to be economical. So my attitude is if you're I love asset protection and I still want to make money on that, right? So if you're paying all these fees on all these LLCs every year, filing tax returns and it's not making you money, then that could be a definite challenge also
Hmm.
Agreed.
on that
Yeah.
too.
What's your risk tolerance? That's really the answer. What's your risk tolerance?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. And everybody's going to be different, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
it, absolutely. So I'm going to ask you a side question since I use that due on sale clause, right? So obviously there's a lot of people, and I mean I'll say his name like Pace Morby, and yeah, they're taking over subject to deals.
Hmm.
So I've seen a lot of investors they would use the trust in a
Hmm.
person's name, right? It's in Jose Ramirez Trust is what they'd create, change
Right.
the beneficiary so that the due on sale clause I'm not. I'm going to kind of say it's kind of under the radar to
Right.
an
Right.
extent on that end of it. Have you seen anything? I know that's kind of a legal. I mean, you're an attorney, so I'm just going to ask you that
Yeah,
kind of
no, I would
question.
come back to it. I would want to read, right?
Yep.
Because we can write around laws, right? And if the
Yep.
language is written in such a way that doesn't violate the federal or the Florida ancillary portion, if it doesn't violate that, you may be able to. I can sign away constitutional rights. So if I sign away those rights, well, that's different. Now I've agreed
Yep.
to that contractually because contracts are in both the Florida Constitution and the federal Constitution. So there are ways around it, but they're disfavored. So can you do it? Yes, but you got to be careful because you don't walk into a courtroom and it'll be like, oh, big company and oh, poor person who needed a trust because their child was sick. That's going to go. It's going to be,
Yeah.
please,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So that all that would matter, right? And law still going to get
Yeah.
applied, but it all matters.
Yep, absolutely. And I know Alexa, I know she's back on board, so thanks, Alexa. I know Chad's information is in the chat also. Jose's information, we'll throw that in there if you don't have it. Also, he is on our website. Make sure you guys give a 5-star Google review today's webinar. Otherwise, Chad's never going to come back. Jose's never going to come back. I'm not going to do it. No, I'm kidding on that. And what I like in the review, if you guys not only give us a 5-star, maybe one thing you learned from Jose and Chad today. Like that's always a cool thing out
Yeah,
there.
put it
So
in the
that gives
chat.
us better. The other thing I always ask is, as we're also wrapping up on time, if there's other topics that you guys love, right? You said, hey, like it'd be great on this. And the reason that we have Chad on and you know, and we're so thankful for him to take out the time is you guys have told Jose and myself, man, we need to know more about trust.
We hear it all the time.
Yeah,
Every time, the questions are like overwhelming, and there's so many questions about trust and LLCs.
yeah.
And we're like, you
And
know
the thing
what? Let's
is,
bring Chad on. He's my
yeah,
guy.
and what we always do is, Chad, you'll be happy about this, is we always tell everyone we do not give legal advice. I don't give accounting advice. I leave it
Uh,
for the experts for you guys also. And we're almost, I think we're rolling through these questions, some great questions today too. So we have about 10 minutes left. Also, we'll announce who our winner is in a bit. What would you say, right? Let's go, let's kind of wrap this up a little bit, right? First of all, I'm going to use the question whether on the tax end of it, and I know, Jose, we kind of already talked about this offline. Some of the new things that are happening on the tax side of the federal government.
Mhm.
So are you seeing any, is there a quick something that you know, hey, this is some great news, whether
Oh, of
uh,
course, man. You,
this
you
is
know there
happening?
is. There's a law that just a bill that just passed.
Yep.
It's called One Big Beautiful Bill Act, right? Which includes a lot of goodies. 100% depreciation is back. And actually, we touched on this earlier, where the exception for the estate exception is sunsetting at the end of the year, but it looks like they extended it, making it permanent. Actually, it says here permanent, increasing the exemption. The bill will permanently increase the estate and gift tax exemption to $15 million per individual starting in 2026. So that means that we're not going to go back to the old $5 million exemption, which is pretty powerful, pretty cool. But there's some goodies on there, man. I'm really have to spend the time to review the entire bill, and we're going to talk about it. Let's do a fireside chat to talk about the
Yeah.
goodies. But the main one is really the 100% bonus depreciation for all business owners. That's back. I mean, that's going to start
Yeah.
moving real estate all over again because that's a huge deduction, right?
Yeah,
Business tax.
if you're not using that and you haven't been watching our stuff, you're literally throwing away money, right? And if you want to throw away money, just give it to me. Give it to Jose, give it to Chad. We're very money friendly.
Money
So no
conscious,
problem.
money aware. We understand money.
yeah.
So,
Chad, what would on a recap of anything you would tell our audience about trust, or because I know you, I mean, you gave so many good nuggets. And luckily, you know, I know some of the basics and I learned a ton of stuff today. What would you tell someone that's, I'm not really sure, or, you know, what, you know, I mean, you went all over on trust. So you tell me what you would want to
So
give up.
I threw in the chat. I shared with you guys, but I put in the chat as well. A very plain, basic. I call it the 5 pillars of asset protection, right? So it gives you some nice tips for people because of course, you really do want to talk to an attorney. I always tell people, I looked up on Google. I looked up how to do brain surgery as well. I probably shouldn't start cutting into somebody's head. So it is a complicated area. I just
yeah.
happen to like it, and so I can relate it back in a way that's very generic to people. And the one thing I tell all my clients is, listen, if I had a magic wand, I don't, but if I did, I literally would tell every adult to have a trust because I have been doing hundreds of probate cases, and zero of all of those cases did they want to be there. Okay, so if you don't want to be there, and it's always more money for at least for our firm, I could say it's always more money to go probate, then why wouldn't you set it up? And what I had shared before, our 1500, 1750, that's our typical pricing. That's a full plan. It's not just a trust. It comes with healthcare documents, a living will, power of attorney. It is all you're ever going to need. And then you don't need any, it literally goes in a shelf, but you're protected for the rest of your life. If you're married, your spouse is protected for the rest of your life. So
Yeah.
it's not about, well, I only have a house. If you have any assets,
Yeah.
at some point in time, you're going to have to go to probate. Oh no, I did beneficiaries. There are every single day in probate, there are beneficiary designation failures every day. Insurance is life insurance, not supposed to be in probate. I name a beneficiary, and what do you think happens? Beneficiary dies first.
Yeah.
Now we're sitting there with this a whole sometimes a very large asset, and like, well, I can't fix it. It's already you've already made that issue. But if you put that last line with the contingent beneficiary, so I'll make it up, right? I'm gonna give my life insurance goes to my son Mason, right? And then right below that it says or the trust.
Yeah.
And that way it never fails. It's always going to come in and it's always going to keep itself out of probate. So that's the biggest focus of for any person. Stay out of probate. And believe me, I like the probate money, but I know that nobody wants to be there. And it's not a nice place to be because it's so complicated. So have a trust. That's it. They're not complicated. They're only complicated if you make them complicated.
It's funny, we didn't even touch on, and I'll have to think about this in the future, was the estate planning side of it. And what I mean about, hey, your parents are older, and I always get this wrong. Is it Medicaid or Medicare that can
Medicaid.
take
Yeah.
Medicaid?
Medicaid. Yeah.
Medicare.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
For
without even like if you're not set up with that,
right.
you have this asset that's free and clear, and unfortunately, one of your parents, they go into a facility. And if it's not done right, you could easily lose that asset.
Yeah. Medicaid's a big area. So it's a special type of planning. I do it.
Yep.
It's more expensive because we're trying to keep all our assets, and they're looking at where you can only have $2,000 in assets to qualify for Medicaid.
Yeah.
$2,000. So there are legal strategies accepted by the federal government in Florida that will let you bring that number down. That's
Yeah.
why it costs money, but it costs money because I can protect quite a bit of money. The homestead we can protect because it's exempt, and we can do things when they're married. So that is a special type of planning. You want to do it when you're considering Medicaid because who in this chat wants to live with only $2,000 in assets? I mean,
Yeah.
you're below the poverty line.
Yeah.
So yes, but yes, they have the right to, and they file all the time in probate. They have the right if they paid Medicaid monies out to come get it from the estate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not pretty on that end of it too. So,
I agree.
okay, Jose, you got one last thing to add?
I think we're gonna have to really talk about doing this one big beautiful bill act thing because there's some goodies on there. I'm just kind of looking
Okay.
at things and
All right. Yeah, we'll do it.
so
There's a couple of things, right? Like and I'm gonna, as this new bill's happening, right? Or it's going in there and, Jose's studying it. And the cool thing is, he's educating his clients. I always like adding what you always say, the same thing, Jose. How often should you be talking to your tax advisor?
yeah,
How many
yeah.
times a year do you
I
usually,
mean,
like your good
right.
clients?
If you're a business owner, you should be doing it on a quarterly basis at least, right? Quarterly basis, no less than, no less than twice. I hate to say this, but no less than
Yeah.
twice a year, right? But at least on a quarterly basis. Which is a great question actually for Chad as well. How often should you
Yeah,
be
that's gonna
talking
say
to
on the trust
your
side. How
attorney,
many?
right? In terms of like updating your trust. I mean, once you do it, is it set it and forget it, or should you do some updates every few years?
Set it and forget it. Perfect. That's in my 5 pillows. It is because our life for all of us evolves. So what I usually tell my client is I like 5 years because big things happen in 5 years. And then
Yeah.
so at least every 5 years, pull it off the shelf, dust it off, just take a look at it. It's not going to take you a long time. The other thing is I tell them big life events. Like I've had some of my clients where I made a trust for them and then they had children after the trust and the children are almost grown. I'm like, did you
Don't
want
have
to tell
time.
me you had children? I could have put some
Yeah.
things in there. So big life events, a divorce, birth of a child, those types of things really should go back to your attorney. Hey, should I make any new changes? The attorney should be reaching out if there's some big law change, like what Jose was just mentioning. That's a brand new change. We all assumed that Trump was going to do that. That's what we were assuming was going to happen, right? Everyone wants it, but there was no guarantee. So if it had been the other, then I would be reaching out to my clients to say, hey, it's sunsetted, pretending that bill didn't happen. It's January. Hey, because you are at this number, we now need to look at restructuring your trust, or you're going to have this big tax implication because it all changed. So those are the things I say over 5 years because you really don't need to change it a lot. And any major event that occurs, those things really should bring you to, hey, Mr. Attorney, I had a baby, I had divorced or whatever. What should I do? Because each one of those events really they need a look at your trust. Really important.
Yep. I
Yeah, that's good
totally agree
advice.
with you.
And
Great
be
advice.
proactive, guys. I mean, be proactive. You as business owners, you really what you're doing is transitioning into a world where you're responsible for your own life, for everything that happens in your life.
Yeah.
So be proactive, right? If you're making money, do some tax planning. If you have assets you want to protect, get a trust, get an LLC, right? You got to be
Yeah.
proactive about these things.
What I would say, not the word or, it's and, right? Like it's I'm gonna maybe do tax planning or I'm gonna do it. No, you got to do and.
Yeah, do it
It's just
all.
it's an integral part of your business. If I didn't think it was important, I would not have Jose or Chad on today, or so many times that we've had Jose, because I want to pound it in your head. It's probably the easiest because it's frustrating,
Ingrained. Yeah.
because we just see too many people work too hard for their money, and then just the poor planning, and it goes away. When there's other people, again, you could do all this stuff legally. That's what the laws are out there for. So I want to thank you guys. Oh, and Alexa popped back in.
Yeah,
So
Alexa.
I did a
Always good to see
so-so
you.
job at most, Alexa. So
No,
1 out of 10, probably a 2.5. I screwed up everything. So I'm
I
just gonna
don't.
come
You did
clean. So
okay,
we're gonna
Alexa.
cut that first part out of the replay. So my bad on that end of it. I know somebody, at least one, someone's got paid to hang out today. Who's the
Yeah,
lucky winner?
we have a 1 year membership going to Jarvis S. Congratulations.
Nice.
Awesome. All
Woo!
right, Jarvis. Jarvis got paid. Just make sure you hit our office and get those benefits and all the above. Again, I want to thank Jose, Chad, for taking their time out to speak to you guys.
Yes, thank you, Chad.
I obviously, Jose is our go-to guy at BPM RIA for tax advisory. Chad is not only, a motivational speaker, he's a great attorney. He's also the go-to guy for DRIA, the Dade RIA, also for us too. So if you
Mhm.
need anything for trust, he's the guy to reach out to. I think it's just very important.
Yeah.
And again, make sure you give us a 5-star Google review for these guys. And we'll see you, I guess, what's today, Thursday. I
You
think
guys
our
on
next event is
Tuesday.
Tuesday. I'm doing another fireside chat. And we have Jose on the record that he's going to talk about the new beautiful tax bill. We'll
Yeah,
do
we got to
another
schedule it. We got to
fireside
schedule
chat
that.
coming
Yeah.
too. So,
But last thing, guys, I,
yep,
I wanted to say that not only I appreciate the kind words, Anish. I'm the go-to guy. Chad is my go-to guy for trust.
there
So
you go.
I trusted him with my own stuff. So guys, he's great. He's
Yeah.
a great guy all around. You want to reach out to him? His contact information is in the chat. Don't forget to register for my next webinar, which is happening sometime next month. I do one every month. The link is in the chat. All right. Thank you so
Yeah,
much, Chad, for being here. We
thank
appreciate
you.
you.
Oh,
Great
that was
information, very valuable.
Yeah. And Jarvis, by the way, just email or call our office.
Oh, I'll get you, Jarvis. Don't worry. I'll find
Oh, yeah,
you.
we'll find you. We'll find you. We love giving away stuff for you guys. So,
Yes, and you
uh,
guys please catch the replay. It'll be posted in less than 24 hours. We're getting it up quick now. And please share it with somebody who needs this information. I will send each and every one of you a thank you email. Chad actually has a handout for you guys with the pillars. So look out for that. I'll attach it to the thank you email. It's coming from me, Alexa at bpmria.com. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Jose, Anish, and Chad. I only caught the second half, but it was fantastic. I'll be sure to watch the replay myself because that was
Yes.
really, really good. So thank you guys so
Thank you, guys.
much.
Good
Have a
seeing
thank
great
you.
you
rest of your
guys.
day. We'll
Take
see you
Appreciate
care.
it.
next week.
Take
Bye,
care,
guys.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.